Okay, so here's an example of a schedule that for some fictitious project. Now, let's take a look at the columns. And notice it's in Excel. It's not in any mysterious project scheduling software, although to be honest, I did create it in Microsoft Project. I then copied and pasted it into Excel. The minimum data I must have in a schedule is the name of a task, any deliverable that may be produced as a result, the effort and the duration, we'll talk about those in a second because I need both of those, start date, the finish date, any predecessors that helps me create my network diagram, and the resources. Who or what am I going to use to be able to complete this specific task or activity? Now note here I have some indentation. Analysis, underneath that I indent an activity. Underneath activity I have a task with a series of subtasks. I have another activity with a series of subtasks. Activity with a series of sub. Why do I do that? Well, readability. Oh my goodness. If I have everything without indentation, it would be like reading a book that has no paragraph marks, no sentences, no periods. It's just a glob of stuff that I have to comprehend. Look at this. I've got 52 lines of things. So by breaking it out by a phase, activities within a phase, tasks within an activity, I can break it into decomposed pieces that I can look at. I can just look at my staff requirements team here as one comprehensive piece of work. Or I could look at my interview stakeholders activity, whatever that is, as one piece of work. It's comprehensible, it's understandable. I've broken it into pieces I can chew on. How do you eat an elephant? Bite by bite. So I have my task name, deliverable, my start date, or my effort and duration. Why effort and duration? Effort tells me the amount of work. Duration tells me the time it will take to get that done. Well, if I'm working one person for 8 hours, doesn't that take a day? Yes. If I'm working for 16 hours, but I'm only spending 20% of my time, note the project manager spending 20% of his time, then that 16 hours spans 10 days. This is an effort-driven task. This is a duration-driven task. Well, why can't I do those 16 hours in 2 days? Well, it may not be feasible. Here I'm interviewing candidates to staff a team, and I may not be able to schedule back-to-back interviews. I may not be able to adequately interview a person if all I'm doing is interviewing a person and another person and another person. I may want to space them out, so I do, in this case, 2 interviews a day. It may not be feasible to get the number of candidates in at a time that's conducive for me back to back to back to back. They may have to interview around other positions or other work that they're currently doing. So duration and effort work in concert with one another. This is the hours. So if I'm calculating the cost of the project and the project manager cost me $100 an hour, well, more realistically, $10 an hour, then 16 hours, this task is going to cost me $160, even though it will take 2 weeks or 10 working days to complete. All right, let's take a second look here. So also I'm going to schedule off of duration. So starting on March 14th, it's going to end 10 work days later on the evening of March 28th. Let's take a look at these tasks and activity names. Notice how it's verb, adjective, noun. Noun, interview the executive team, interview management, document a process, review the process. Could I just call it process? I could, but then what? What is process? I'm going to do something? I'm going to review something? I'm going to look at something? By putting a noun, an adjective, and a verb in here, I have a very complete definition of what is going on in this specific task. Does that matter? Well, sometimes I create a schedule. I may not come back to it and really execute the project for a month or two. And yes, I do forget things after a month or two. So by having a solid nomenclature for how I name tasks, I'm making a very clear statement on what's going on. I can look at it. It's objectively accessible as to what I'm doing. We're going to use those words a lot in these courses, objectively accessible. Now, notice something else. I've got predecessors defined here as well. So before I can interview candidates, I first have to know to review the team needs. The predecessor is line 4. So I need to know what the team needs are. Before I can kick off the team, I need to interview the candidates. And before I can review the schedule, I need to have be able to create my schedule based upon what resources I have available to me. So the predecessors denote the precedence or the network of how tasks will occur. Now, we don't necessarily always follow one after another. Look at this one. I have a finish to start relationship that I'm adding 5 days of float to. So even though task 9 begins on, and the numbers are a little bit off because I copied this from a Microsoft project schedule, so the row numbers do not correlate to the task numbers. This predecessor is this task, so I'm going to, when this task finishes on April the 5th, I'm going to start this next task 5 days later. So that means, well, I should be, okay, so I apologize. That did not work out the way I planned. That should be beginning 4 days later because I'm putting 5 days of float. Why? I'm interviewing an executive team. I don't know that they're going to be available when it's convenient for me to be available. So I put 5 days of float. Again, notice how I put percentages of allocation. Here, everyone is assigned full-time. Here, a project manager is assigned 20% of the time. For more project charters where we create deliverables and deliverable dates, I match those back to a deliverable column based upon a delivery date. So here is how, during the monitoring control phase of the project, I am able to ensure the project stays on track. In my charter, I said the interview summary will be done on 4/29. I put that date here. I'm able to track actual completion against projected start and finish to determine that the project is on time. And as I proceed through the project, I have multiple deliverables identifying when things are going to get done. It's objectively accessible. I have a framework for monitoring project progress in terms of schedule. And in next week's session, we'll talk about costing and how I manage costing against the project using the same structure based upon the allocation of resources and the cost of those resources within the project.